Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone,
I'm Ian Avenido.
and I'm Argina Badang. And in this video, we are going to discuss to you the topic about freezing. So, as we know, fish and other aquatic products are one of the most highly perishable commodities. That is why nagpe-freeze tayo or nag-chill tayo ng products na to para ma-preserve siya or ma-extend yung shelf life niya. Next. So, freezing is a way of stopping either partly or entirely the deteriorative activities of microorganisms and enzymes. Basically, it is a form of partial mild dehydration in which the water is removed as ice. So, freezing of fish becomes essential when other means of preserving fish, such as icing, are unsuitable or impractical. Kaya ito nagpe-freeze kasi kunwari yung chilling is not suitable because it will only keep the fish at around 1 to 2 weeks, while freezing will keep the fish longer, and under proper conditions it may last for several months. Next. Microorganisms stops multiplying around negative 10 degrees Celsius and below. The activity of enzymes, either microbiological in origin or inherent to the fish, is in general rapidly reduced or redirected as the temperature is reduced below the freezing point of about negative 1 degrees Celsius. So magsa-stop lang mag-multiply yung microorganisms pag negative 10 degrees Celsius and below na yung temperature. And yung activity naman ng enzymes, mas rapidly reduce or mas mag-slow down siya pag below the freezing point na ang temperature, which is about negative 1 degrees Celsius. Next. Okay. Fish contain between 60 to 80% water depending upon the species. At negative 1 and negative 3 degrees Celsius, the water in the flesh begins to freeze. During freezing, most of the water is converted into ice. And at negative 5 degrees Celsius, about 75% of the water in fish muscle is frozen. So alam naman natin na water is one of the composition ng fish. Fish is composed of water uh, depending on the species kung ilang percentage ng water content ang meron nito. So sa process ng fish, we actually have three stages. The first stage is the removal of heat. Second stage is the conversion of water to ice or the crystallization of water. And the third stage is the further cooling of frozen fish. So in stage one, which is the removal of heat, in this stage, the temperature falls fairly rapidly to just below 0 degrees Celsius, which is the freezing point of fresh water. The freezing rate at this stage is influenced by air temperature. A high freezing rate is attained by sufficiently lowering the air temperature. So dito, nire-remove niya yung heat sa fish. And yung temperature dapat mag-reach siya below the freezing point. Kumbaga, pinapalamig niya yung fish dito until mag-reach siya ng around mga negative 1 degree Celsius. Pag negative 1 degree Celsius na siya, doon na tayo sa stage 2, which is the conversion of water to ice. So yung water content ng fish dito is maka-convert siya into ice. Yung temperature naman in this stage remains fairly constant at about negative 1 degrees Celsius, as the main bulk, around 75% of the water in the fish, freezes. This stage is known as the critical zone or period of thermal arrest. The faster the product passes through the critical zone, the less quality loss will occur. The freezing rate at this stage is affected by air velocity, which is the primary factor that influences the removal of the latent heat, equivalent to 60 to 70% of all heat to be removed. So sa stage na to, constant lang yung temperature niya, mga around negative 1 degree Celsius. And dito tinawag siyang critical zone kasi dito nag-determine kung magiging okay ba yung quality ng fish. So pag mas mabilis yung pagko-convert niya sa water content sa fish into ice, mas less yung quality mawawala. So mas magiging okay yung result ng product. Next. In this stage, sa stage 3, further cooling of frozen fish. Yung temperature ng fish dito is mas pababa pa. The temperature of fish flesh drops rapidly again as further cooling occurs and most of the remaining water becomes frozen. The frozen fish attains the desired temperature for storage at around negative 30 degrees Celsius. So yun nga, mas from the constant temperature na negative 1 degree Celsius dun sa stage 2. Sa stage 3, mas pababa pa siya yung temperature niya until ma-reach na yung desired temperature for storage, which is around negative 30 degrees Celsius. Next. So here we have picture sa typical fish freezing curve. There, yung given temperature niya dyan is 20 degrees Celsius yung temperature ng fish from the start before pa siya na-freeze. So sa stage 1, pinapalamig yung fish until mag-reach yung temperature ng below freezing point. So pag below freezing point na siya, which is about negative 1 degree Celsius, dun na sa stage 2 na siya, which is period of thermal arrest. And then pag around ma-remove na yung heat, around 60 to 70%, mas bababa na yung temperature niya, which is sa stage 3 na tayo, yun na until mas bababa pa yung temperature niya until ma-reach na yung desired temperature, which is negative 30 degrees Celsius. Okay, next slide. So sa types of freezing, we have 2 types of freezing, which is slow freezing, yung number 1, and the second one is quick freezing or snap freezing. Next slide. In slow freezing, the products produced are of inferior quality or poor quality. From the word slow, mabagal kasi yung freezing dito. So the longer the fish is allowed to be at negative 1 degree Celsius to negative 5 degrees Celsius, the greater the extent of denaturation due to maximum enzyme activity as well as maximum ice crystal formation. The zone of maximum ice crystal formation is between negative 1 degree Celsius and negative 5 degrees Celsius. Very long freezing times can result in bacterial spoilage. Dito bakit poor quality yung products niya? Kasi kumbaga mabagal yung pag-conversion ng water content sa fish to ice. Tinatawag nila ang critical zone. Dahil mas mabagal siya, so mas less yung quality niya. Tsaka pwede siyang result ng bacterial spoilage pag mas mabagal yung freezing time niya dahil yung temperature kasi dito sa critical zone, negative 1 degree Celsius to negative 5 degree Celsius. And yung microorganism, di ba, around negative 10 degrees Celsius and below pa lang siya magsa-stop. So pag mas matagal yung freezing times, magre-result siya in bacterial spoilage. Okay, next. Quick freezing or snap freezing. Quick freezing is a general term applied to most freezing processes and gives rise to the term IQF or individual quick frozen. So meron tayong picture dyan, example, yung shrimp. There are 2 kinds of frozen shrimp. Yung isa, naka-block siya, nagdidikit-dikit yung shrimp, and yung isa naman is individual siya. Frozen din yan siya, pero hindi siya nagkakadikit-dikit. It did not stick together. Yung hindi nagkakadikit-dikit na shrimp, yan yung example ng IQF or individually quick frozen product. Yun namang nasa block, yun yung regular lang na frozen product. So ito, IQF is actually a method that does not allow large ice crystals to form in the cells of the product. Kaya yung product is individually frozen or each piece is frozen, hindi siya nagkakadikit-dikit. Okay, next. So from the word quick or snap, meaning mabilis lang siya. So yung freezing time dito usually takes only 2 hours or less to go through the zone of maximum ice crystal formation, which is between -1 degree Celsius to -5 degrees Celsius. And the warmest portion of the fish should be at -20 degrees Celsius at the completion of freezing. So ito yung dapat yung temperature niya sa completion of freezing dapat hindi tataas sa -20 degrees Celsius. Dapat yung warmest portion ng warmest na yun, kumbaga yung pinaka thickest version ng fish, dapat is nasa -20 degrees Celsius. And dahil mas bilis lang yung freezing time dito, mas okay yung quality, much better yung quality ng mapaproduce niya. Next, we have freezing systems. In freezing systems, meron tayong air blast freezing. In air blast freezing, a continuous flow of cold air is passed over the product. Uniform freezing is attained only if the temperature and speed of the air over the product are constant. Fairly high airspeed is necessary to avoid too long freezing times. Powerful fans that tend to heat the air produce high airspeed, and the remaining heat is removed by the refrigeration machinery. Meron tayong picture dyan. That is an example of an air blast freezer. Next slide. So air blast freezers can be continuous or batch type. Pag continuous siya, it is where the product moves through a freezer, while pag batch type siya, the product is stationary or hindi siya nag-move. So yung sa previous slide, yung picture doon, yun siya yung batch type. And dito naman sa picture na to, sa slide na to, is an example of a continuous freezer. So air blast freezers can be very versatile and therefore are useful in producing individual quick frozen or IQF products of different crustaceans, fish fillet, and value-added products such as breaded portions or fish sticks. So versatile yung air blast freezers kasi nagpo-produce sila ng IQF. Kumbaga, hindi blocks kagaya nung example kanina sa picture ng shrimp. Hindi blocks yung mapaproduce dito kundi IQF, individually quick frozen products. Next slide. So yung main disadvantages lang ng blast freezers is that they occupy a lot of space and they consume more power than equivalent plate freezers kasi 'di ba they use powerful fans para mag-freeze ng product. So here we have a video clip para mas makita ninyo, mas malaman nyo kung ano yung air blast freezer. So that is an example of air blast freezer. Here we have another example of air blast freezer, pero yung continuous type. Next slide. Next, we have contact or plate freezing. The product is placed in a direct contact with hollow metal freezer plates through which a cold fluid is passed. It is not as versatile as air blast freezers. and is used for freezing products such as whole fish fillets, shrimps, and other products into blocks. It can be of the vertical or horizontal type depending on the arrangement of the plates. So sa contact or plate freezing, hindi siya IQF yung napaproduce dito, kundi blocks yung product. Meron tayong picture dyan, yun yung example ng uh, freezer plates, tsaka may product na rin siya dyan. And makikita nyo din dyan sa picture na yan yung example ng horizontal type na plate freezer. Next slide. Vertical type of plate freezers are loaded directly into the freezer and is suitable for freezing whole fish at sea and for bulk freezing. Below that, yan ang example ng vertical type of plate freezers. Another type of plate freezers is horizontal plate freezers, which require the packing of the products in trays or cartons before placing them in the freezer. So yan naman yung example ng horizontal plate freezer. Here we have a video example ng plate freezers para mas malaman natin or how it works. Next. Next, we have spray or immersion freezing. Here in immersion freezing, the product comes into direct contact with the fluid refrigerant. It is mainly used for producing very high quality or high value and specialized IQF products. It includes liquid nitrogen and carbon dioxide freezers. Sa picture na yan, an example of spray or immersion freezing and how it works. So here, so kung sa air blast freezers, gumagamit sila ng powerful fans. Dito naman, gumagamit sila ng fluid refrigerant. Ginagamit nila yung liquid nitrogen or carbon dioxide. Next. So here we have an example, short video clip example of how spray or immersion freezing works. Next. Next is freezing procedure. Next slide. Raw material. The freezing process at below -10 degrees Celsius will stop bacterial action. Chemical, biochemical, and physical processes leading to irreversible changes will occur at a very slow rate. The state of the raw material before freezing will determine the quality of the final product. So dapat before natin i-freeze yung product from harvest pa lang, yung raw material niya dapat good na yung quality para good din yung result or yung final product. Next slide. So freezing cannot reverse deterioration that has already occurred. Fish with a certain degree of pre-freezing spoilage will maintain it throughout freezing, frozen storage, and thawing. So kung yung fish mo, yung raw material mo, before mo siya i-freeze, meron na siyang damage, hindi na yon pag i-freeze mo, maintain pa rin yung damage, hindi yon mag-heal, hindi yon mawawala. Kumbaga, kung ano yung itsura ng product na raw material na i-freeze mo, ganun din yung magiging result niya. So that's why importante na maganda yung raw material natin, na walang damage para maganda rin yung final product. Next. Treatment before freezing. fish for freezing must be kept well iced or chilled before freezing. Iced water or chilled seawater, which is 2 parts ice to 1 part water, can be used to lower the temperature of the fish to or close to 0 degrees Celsius. Dipping or immersion of fish in ice slurry for 1 to 2 hours will be sufficient. Chilling can reduce the time of freezing when slow freezers are used. So before freezing, di ba nga dapat yung raw material natin is of good quality para good din yung quality ng final product. So dapat meron tayong treatment before freezing. After harvest pa lang, pagkaka-harvest pa lang ng product, kailangan na natin siyang i-chill. I-chill natin siya para ma-preserve siya. Pwede natin gamitin yung ice water or yung chilled seawater. And dapat yung temperature niya close to freezing point, kumbaga. Next, we have freezing. The freezing methods employed will depend on the type of products to be frozen. Overloading of the freezer must be avoided. The freezing time must be as short as possible to prevent quality loss. Freeze fish for the correct length of time, particularly important if the fish or fillets are wrapped before freezing. The thicker the wrapping, the longer the freezing time. So yung pag-freeze na natin, yung method ng pag-freeze natin ng product, nakadepende siya kung anong klase ng product yung i-frozen natin. Kumbaga, kung anong klase ng species, kung gaano kalaki, kung ano yung product na i-freeze natin. Tapos iwasan nating mapuno yung freezer natin. Dapat sakto lang and dapat i-freeze natin siya right away para ma-prevent yung quality loss. Next. Treatment after freezing. If the fish had not been packaged or wrapped, as in the case of very large fish, before freezing, glazing, dipping or immersion in ice water, which is around which is around 0 degrees Celsius of the frozen fish must be done immediately after freezing. So kung hindi naka-package yung or naka-wrap yung fish, kagaya nung sa mga fillet, actually yung mga fillet kasi nira-wrap siya para ma-avoid yung tinatawag nating freezer burn. Kaya siya nira-wrap yung mga fillet. Pero yung mga malalaking isda, hindi siya pinapackage or nira-wrap. So pag ganon, giniglaze natin siya. Yung sa picture na yan, it is how glazing works. Diyan sa picture na yan, may ginagamit silang machinery para mag-glaze yung product. Okay, next slide. Glazing will prevent dehydration or drying up and oxidation of the fish during storage of the frozen fish. Glazing must be renewed when the ice coating or film dissipates. So here we have a short video para pakita sa inyo kung how glazing works. Next slide. Packaging. The frozen fish must be handled carefully during packaging. A proper packaging material has the following attributes. It should fit the product, it should be airtight, and should have some degree of impermeability to air and water vapors. So, yung sa pagpapack na ng fish, kailangan handled din siya carefully, tsaka yung packaging material, nagmamatter din siya, kailangan fit siya sa product, hindi masyadong malaki, hindi din maliit. At dapat airtight siya, dapat hindi nakakapasok yung water vapor tsaka yung air to some degree. Next is storage. So frozen products must be kept frozen in a cold store at the recommended storage temperature, which is negative 30 degrees Celsius. Delays during transfer of the product from the freezer to the cold store must be avoided. Frozen fish must be handled with care since they are brittle and easily damaged. Next, quality assessment of frozen fish. Frozen fish undergo some changes during storage, such as the gradual development of off flavors and off odors and other physical deterioration. The defects may pass unnoticed, but after a sufficiently long period of storage, this might intensify and the fish become unpleasant to eat. The rate of quality loss will depend on the storage temperature and the extent of temperature fluctuation. Okay, next. Denaturation. So proteins undergo irreversible changes in sensory quality such as in appearance and texture. These changes are accompanied by loss in functional properties of the muscle proteins, mainly solubility, water retention, and gelling ability, and lipid emulsifying properties as well as by gradual decrease in enzyme activity. So pag dito denaturation, pag nag-undergo na ng denaturation yung isda, so malalaman natin yung kasi yung appearance saka texture niya, hindi na siya gano'n ka-firm compare sa yung fresh pa siya, hindi na siya firm. And usually, kaya kailangan talaga na mabilis yung pag-freeze sa kanya, mabilis yung conversion from water to ice content ng fish para maiwasan yung denaturation, pagbaba ng quality ng texture tsaka appearance ng isda. Next. Lipid changes. Rusting and rancidity are brought about by the changes occurring in lipids during frozen storage of fatty fish. Rusting refers to the movement of oil to the surface of fish during cold storage, resulting to a yellow or light brown discoloration. So, dyan sa picture na yan, may example tayo dyan. Medyo nag-yellowish or nag-discoloration, may discoloration siya, which is yellowish or light brown. Yan yung tinatawag nila na rusting. Parang siyang kulay taya. Okay, next. Rancidity naman, ito yung unpleasant odor or color that develop when fats have undergone oxidation during storage. It is characterized in its early stage by distinguished fishy odor and flavor. Unpleasant taint, followed by unpleasant taint, which is described as linseed oil or paint. So, pag yung rancid na siya or meaning mabaho na siya, may fishy odor or flavor na siya. Next. Next, we have freezer burn. This damage is due to the excessive drying, resulting to matte white patches on the surface of frozen fish and subsequent change in the appearance of the thawed product. So yan sa picture makikita nyo yung example ng fish na freezer burn. Kaya siya yung na-mention ko kanina, nirarap yung mga like yung mga fillets, fish fillets, nirarap siya yung mga isda para hindi siya magkaroon ng direct contact sa ice, maiwasan yung freezer burn. Kaya importante din talaga yung packaging. Next. Dehydration and weight loss. During cold storage, dehydration of frozen fish tends to occur naturally. The surface, flesh, and thin parts of the fish become very dry and porous, and loss in weight is due to physical damage from dehydration. The loss is almost insignificant, usually not exceeding 1%, provided correct freezer and freezing process are employed. So dito naman sa dehydration and weight loss, yun nga, pag na-freezer burn yung product, due to ano yan, yung dehydration. Kasi pag i-freeze mo siya, di ba, mawawala na yung water niya. So mag-dry up na siya. Usually ito nangyayari pag super tagal na na-freeze ng fish. Kasi yung pag-freeze naman natin ng fish, hindi naman siya forever magpe-preserve yung fish. kumbaga ma-extend lang yung shelf life niya. So yun nga, masisira naman pa rin siya eventually. Kaya bababa din yung quality niya. Next. Development of cold store flavor and odor. Frozen fish acquire characteristics cold store odor and flavor due to improper and extended cold storage. So yun nga, just as I mentioned before na pag mag-produce tayo ng product, um, it will just extend the product's life or shelf life for several months. Pero as the longer siyang mas-store or frozen dyan, ma-store, ma-stock up dyan, mas mawawala yung, mas pababa yung quality niya kasi nga, hindi naman siya, ma-expiry date din kumbaga, hindi siya forever na hindi na masisira. Masisira pa rin siya. Yun nga lang, pag i-freeze natin, masuslow down yung pagkasira niya at mapapreserve yung quality niya to some extent. Depende sa pag-handle natin ng product na yun. Okay, next. Next, the topic is about thawing of frozen products, which will be discussed to us by Ian Avenido.
So hi guys, my topic is thawing of frozen products. So first, what is thawing? Thawing is a process of ice or frozen substances that becoming liquid or soft as a result of warming up. So thawing is thawing of frozen product is as important as the quick freezing because it in the maintaining of quality of frozen fishery products. The process of thawing should have no noticeable effect on the quality of the fish. Of course, kapag walang noticeable effect sa quality of fish, of course, sa condition din niya, yung growth ng bacteria is dapat hindi din siya ma-occur. Then, thawing methods can be divided into two groups. The two group is those in which the heat is directed into the flesh from the surface and those with which is generated more or less uniformly throughout the flesh. So in the first group, the heat is applied to the surface of the fish by exposing the fish to still or moving moist air by immersing them in or spraying them with water or allowing water vapor to condense on them. And in second group is the methods depending upon the absorption of electrical power at means radio and microwave frequencies. So next is thawing in air. So under thawing in air, we have the still air. So frozen fish can be left overnight at room temperature. Air temperature should not be higher than 20 degrees Celsius, provided the surface of the fish does not become too dry, so the thawed product is acceptable. So thawing in air is in general, it is feasible. So it means it's very easily and conveniently to every single one of us. So we just need only a small space and good space, and it is very for this is the most beautiful advantage because we don't need any equipments to perform this still air towing. So next is moving air or air blast towing. So frozen fish can be towed much more quickly in moving air. This can be done efficiently by putting the fish on open mesh trays stacked on frames or trolleys in a tunnel not more than 2 meter high. So yung distance between the trays should around be twice the thickness yung kakapal ng blocks nung anong ilalagay natin doon being to be towed. Air should not blown over the fish at a temperature of 20 degrees Celsius and a velocity of about 8 meters per second at attain to shortest towing time. So this picture here is a example of moving air or air blast towing. This picture here is most industries use this kind of machinery. So next is towing in water. So towing in water is can be cheap and easy way of towing, provided that a whole fish yung itotow natin pag sa water, and of course yung water natin, yung supply ng water natin dapat ay clean. Then towing can be by immersion, by spraying, or combination of two. And sa towing in water is ang fillets is hindi recommended yung pagtotowing kapag fillet yung itotow natin. So water for towing should not be warmer than 18 degrees Celsius, and the towing rate should be at least 5 milliliter per second. So this picture here is an example of towing in water, and most of this picture is most used in industries, big industries. Next, vacuum towing. If air conditioning water vapor is cooled, it inevitably reaches a temperature below which water begins to condense as liquid. As it does so, a large amount of heat is released. So then, when water vapor condenses on the surface of frozen fish, the heat liberated at once absorbed and finally toast the fish. So this pictures here as well a machinery that the big industries used. Next. So electrical methods. The methods commonly used by are dielectrical and electrical resistance heating for towing or tempering. So the speed of towing by air, water, and vacuum methods is restricted by the rate of conduction of heat through the fish. If a faster rate of towing is desired, so we must use these electrical methods. Then microwaves are example, but microwave heating for it is only for tempering. Dielectric towing, though more expensive than other methods of tow heating, it takes only 20% of time for air or vacuum towing. In microwave towing, the frozen fish is subjected to microwaves, radiation flows into the flesh of the absorbed, resulting to thawing. So this picture here as well is an example of the microwave heating and the dielectric towing. So next is the handling of frozen fish. So the frozen fish are brittle and easily damaged. Hence, they must be handled carefully. For proper handling of frozen fish during thawing, the following must be observed. So, first, do not pry fish apart during thawing. Do not use ice picks or other sharp object to poke the fish. Then next is do not put frozen fish on the floor as cross-contamination with floor bacteria results. So, wag natin ilagay sa floor para hindi mag-ano ng cross-contamination with the bacteria. The next, always use clean containers to thaw fish, of course. Lastly, do not subject frozen fish to repeat freezing and thawing conditions. Next, manufactured products. So, manufactured products. We have the boneless milk fish or the bangus. So, milk fish is usually sold in wet markets and supermarkets, fresh and frozen in around whole and semi-processed, split or debone. Deboning or removal of bones is done to improve its acceptability to a wider range of consumers. So, as this illustration shows here na ito yung example ng boneless milkfish or the bangus. So I will let you show a short clip about the deboning process.
Isang paraan ng pagpe-preserve ng isda ay ang pagbababad nito gamit lamang ang bawang at ang suka. Masarap yan, lalo-lalo na po yung ginagawa natin yan sa daing na bangus, di po ba? Pero kapag ka po bangus din lang na pag-uusapan, maraming nasasarapan sa daing na bangus, lalo na sa bangus. Kaya lang ang problema ng iba, matinik daw po ang bangus. Pero don't worry mga kasabahay, dahil isasolve namin ang problema ninyo sa mga bangus na patinik. Tuturuan namin kayong mag-debone sa pamamagitan po sa ituturo sa ating How to Debone a Fish with Benji Hilario. Dahil easy-easy lang po yan. Step 1. Kaliskisan ng bangus. Step 2, hugasan. Step 3, tanggalin ang palikpik. Step 4, hatiin ang isda sa pamamagitan ng paghiwa sa ibabaw mula buntot papuntang ulo hanggang sa magmukha itong paru-paro. Step 5, tanggalin ang lamang loob. Step 6, tanggalin ang backbone. Pwede gumamit ng kutsilyo para magawa ito. Step 7, deboning. Kakailanganin na natin ang mosquito forceps dito. Wala itong kinalaman sa lamok, lalo namang hindi ito ginagamit para pumatay ng lamok. Tinawag itong mosquito forceps dahil ito ang pinakamaliit na forceps na ginagamit sa surgery. Ipasok ang forceps sa dorsal muscle. Ito ang unang linya sa laman ng bangus. Gupitin ito at iikot ang forceps pakanan para matanggal ang mga tinik. Ulitin ang proseso hanggang sa umabot sa dulo ng bangus. Isunod naman ang ventral muscle. Ito naman ang pangalawang linya sa laman ng isda. Ulitin ang proseso hanggang sa matanggal na ang mga nakakainis na tinik. Ngayon ay ready na ang inyong boneless bangus at goodbye tinik! O yan mga kasabahay, naturuan na namin kayo kung paano mag-debone ng isda. Easy lang yan. Fish!
So that's a short clip about the procedures on how to debone milkfish. Next, we have freezing up squids. So the peak season of squid fishing is in August here in the Philippines. The edible portions of squids is made up of head, mantle, and legs. The muscle of the torso is composed of two kinds of alternately laminated muscular fibers, one of which circle through the torso to form parallel lines, and the other running from the outer layer of the skin to the inner side. Squid has an inner and outer skin. So the first three is being the network type, and the fourth is being the parallel fibers running vertically. So next, um, the equipments and materials that we need to freeze a squid. So we need the squid, of course, freezing pans, plate freezer, brine 10%, and polyethylene bags. So the procedures on how to freezing of squid is first wash squids thoroughly when drained. Soak or hold squids in brine for 4 hours. Arrange squids individually in freezing pans. The capacity of each pans is 2 kilograms. Fill freezing pans with chilled water. Freeze for 3 hours in a plate freezer. Pack frozen squid blocks in polyethylene bag. And the last is store packed squids in storage freezer temperature for up to 6 months. So next, hindi mawawala ang technical problem sa mga ganitong aspeto. So first technical problem is the browning or blackening of tuna and bonito meat. Frozen tuna or bonito becomes dark brown or dark red during cold storage due to oxidation of hemoglobin in the blood and myoglobin in the meat. Furthermore, the oxyhemoglobin and oxymyoglobin become methemoglobin and myoglobin respectively, which are dark brown or dark red through the oxidative enzymes. Adding sodium nitrate or an antioxidant such as ascorbic acid can prevent this discoloration of tuna meat. So here is kapag ang solusyon dito kapag nagba-brown or blackening yung tuna or bonito meats natin is the sodium nitrate or the antioxidants such as ascorbic acid. So next technical problem is gray discoloration of tuna meat. Greening in tuna meat is due to the presence of trimethylamine oxide or TMAO in the flesh and other factors such as myoglobin content, cysteine concentration, and cooking condition. Greening of tuna meat can be avoided by using only fresh raw materials for freezing and gutting and bleeding or removal of blood of fish before freezing it. So next technical problem is browning or black spots in shrimps and prawns. So the browning or blackening of frozen shrimps and prawns is termed as melanosis. The formation of melanin can be prevented by removing the head, followed by proper washing of shrimps and or prawns before freezing. The proper use of antioxidants such as ascorbic acid will help prevent the discoloration. Dipping of shrimps or prawns in 1% sodium metabisulfate solution for 30 seconds or in a 3% HA bacterol F solution, a mixture of sodium bisulfate, sodium chloride, and dextrose for 15 minutes will also provide protection against black spots during freezing of the shrimps and prawns. So next we have research notes. There are numerous studies have been conducted on the handling, transport, and improvement of storage life of fresh, chilled, and frozen fish and fishery products. So first research notes it's by Arahana et al. 1971. They determined the changes in trimethylamine, TMA, and volatile reducing substances, VRS, during storage of frigate mackerel at various temperatures. Rillo and Albastro in 1974 colorated the greening of steamed cooked tuna with the trimethylamine, pH, and soluble protein content of the raw fish. So here's the example of the greening of steam cooked tuna. So next, the studies on milkfish were that of Santos and Acevedo 1978 on the post-mortem changes in the hypoxanthine content and non-protein nitrogenous compounds in relation to its sensory qualities. BESA on the flavor changes during the storage of milkfish in ice and at negative 12.2 degrees Celsius, and on handling of milkfish during transport, freezing, preservation, and storage by Dolendo et al. In 1977. by Dolendo et al. 1977 recommended the pre-chilling of milkfish to 4 degrees Celsius right after harvest to preserve the quality during transport. So here's the picture of the bangus. So next, on freshwater fish sa Saluan Abdu Hassan in 1990 investigated the effects of delay in icing for tilapia or the Oreochromis niluticus. Delaying icing for 4, 8, and 12 hours would reduce the shelf life of tilapia to 2016 and 1 day respectively. Next is by Guevara et al. At 1978 made a preliminary report on the handling, transport, and depuration in green mussels, while Obares in 1979 worked on the land weight, relationship, and coliforms count of Kulut oyster. So Guevara et al. In 1982 studied the icing and freezing requirements of shucked oysters. Bacterial purification of oysters and mussels was done by Burrill in 1990, where a purification system using recirculating seawater sterilized with ultraviolet radiation was designed. So here are the example of the green bay mussels and the oyster. So next, works on shrimps and squids include that of Bersamin et al. In 1972 on the effect of calamansi citrus metis juice on the preservation of shrimp or swahe. Legaspi and Kiang in 1972 also studied the keeping quality of cooked, beheaded, and whole shrimps stored in ice. Results revealed that cooking shrimp prior to ice storage was more advantageous than storing raw shrimps. So these are the pictures of this. So next, by Apolinario in 1975, determined the best pre-treatment and the shelf life of quick frozen stuffed squid. Steaming for 10 minutes, proper handling, and strict sanitation were found to be very important to obtain a good frozen products. So next, development of standards for the freezing of squid, crabs, and round cod was made by Lustre et al. In 1987. Other investigations include the spoilage pattern of mackerel, Baril et al. In 1985, and Mullet by Sumner and Arhana in 1985, Kalanoga in 1986, on quality changes of brackish prawns by Rayleigh et al. In 1985, on chilling of greasy back shrimps, the Metapeneus ensis by Garay Hardiolin in 1996, and on post-mortem changes in milkfish with delayed icing by Arciaga in 1996. So in order to improve the post-harvest handling of locally caught fish, improvement of containers has also been given attention. The ASEAN Work Group introduced the use of high-density polyethylene containers in municipal fisheries. This is by Kamari and Sayers back in 1979. And lastly, Sen et al. In 1985 introduced improved fish containers from polyethylene and fiberglass with expanded polyurethane and the icebox system. So that's everything, guys. I hope you learned something in this video. So
Thank you for watching
thank you
and
for
have a
watching,
nice day,
guys.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.